Hello and welcome to another edition of the Brian A. Joyce Report. I'm Senator Brian Joyce and I have the honor of representing you and your family along with the towns of Avon, Braintree, Canton, East Bridgewater, Easton, Milton, Randolph, Sharon, Stoughton, and West Bridgewater in the Massachusetts Senate. The purpose of this program is to keep you up to date on what is happening in the legislature, as well as to discuss the vital issues that affect your lives every day. We'll also introduce you to some interesting guests who are some of Massachusetts' most important decision makers. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Democratic candidate for governor and our current Attorney General, Martha Coakley. Obviously, the Attorney General is well known to Massachusetts residents. A native of North Adams, she was one of 5 children raised by her mother who oversaw the household and her father, a veteran of both World War II and the Korean War, as well as a small business owner. Growing up, she said that she was constantly reading Nancy Drew books, as was my sister, by the way, and watching Perry Mason, which led her to pursue a legal career, getting her J.D. from Boston University following her undergraduate education at Williams College. She worked in the private law sector before joining the Middlesex District Attorney's Office prosecuting child abuse cases. She then served in the Department of Justice's Organized Crime Strike Force before returning to the Middlesex DA's office to lead that organization. Eventually, Massachusetts voters elected her Attorney General, where she is currently serving her 2nd term. Her 8 years serving as AG have been quite notable. She was the first Attorney General to successfully challenge the Defense of Marriage Act and secured a $440 million settlement with Wall Street banks for Massachusetts taxpayers and homeowners during the foreclosure crisis. She also recovered a record $100 million in Medicaid fraud prosecutions and combated fraud and public corruption through the establishment of the Public Integrity Unit. She has spent her professional life serving as a passionate advocate for public safety by bringing justice to victims of violent crime while implementing crime prevention and recidivism reduction programs throughout our justice system. Martha lives in Medford with her husband Thomas, a retired police deputy superintendent. Madam Attorney General, thank you for coming and welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you so much.
So as I said earlier, this is not morally safer and hard-hitting journalism, gotcha. This is an opportunity for the people that I have the pleasure of working for to get to know you a little bit better, as I have, to learn to respect and admire you as I have, but also to kind of give you a chance to make your case while you should be the next governor of the Commonwealth, okay?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So here's the first question. Why should we vote for Martha Coakley for governor?
Well, it is a very good question, and I think the voters are lucky. There are 9 people running for governor. There are 5 Democrats. There are at least potentially 2 Republicans, a couple of independents. And so people do have a choice in this race. And I hope that people will look not just at what we say, because many of the candidates will say the same thing and tell you this is what they want, but I hope you'll also look at what your record has been, the kinds of things you've been able to accomplish. And for me, that is talking to voters about going after Wall Street and saying, you know, gee, when I came in as Attorney General, I ran on a platform of promoting a healthy economy, but Wall Street had other ideas. Wall Street wrecked our economy. Those big banks got bailed out. We did not, and we're still climbing out of that in Massachusetts. So my goal as governor, and I believe that when we understand what great strengths Massachusetts has in terms of our innovation economy, our more traditional healthcare, manufacturing, farming, that we can build a healthy economy that will include everybody, that will allow for people to get a good education, to get the workforce training they need, to get on that economic ladder so that they can climb up that ladder and, you know, build a house, build equity, have a family. You know, you mentioned at the introduction growing up in North Adams. You know, my dad worked his way through college. His father died early. He used to work in factories before, during the Depression. My dad worked his way through college, and he and my mom believed that they gave us a good education, that we could chart our own way in life, that we'd be able to follow our dreams. I'm not sure kids and families have that feeling today. And I think it's a struggle for people to say, how are we going to, you know, achieve what we want our kids to have with a good education opportunity?
This could actually be the first generation in the history of the United States that doesn't necessarily believe their standard of living will be better than their parents, that doesn't necessarily think, for a number of a significant segment of our society, that the American dream is attainable. So your suggestion is essentially it's about economic opportunity and jobs.
Yes, and it's important for two reasons. First, for those people who want to follow that dream and work hard to attain it, to look for the future. But the second is, if we don't do that, we find that, Wall Street and folks at the top are doing very well, but everybody else is really not only worried about, can we climb up the ladder, they're worried about falling through the floor. We have folks in this country who, barely make minimum wage, family working two full-time jobs, can't afford their rent in East Boston, and they can't put food on their table for their 16-year-old. So if we're able to raise a minimum wage and provide earned sick time for people, you give folks an opportunity to climb up that ladder, to develop job skills and some equity, and you also give people the hope that if they work hard and they play by the rules, like my family did, that their kids will have a chance to follow their dreams. And that doesn't mean everybody has to, buy a big house or make a lot of money, but you do have to have an opportunity for both boys and girls, and I feel strongly about that all of our kids should have the best education we can give them. And we could do that here in Massachusetts. We'd work with our businesses to make sure that our kids have science and technology, engineering, math. I'd like to add an A to that, to put arts back in our curriculum, give kids time for recess, and teach our kids computer science. And Brian, I just want to tell you a quick story because, we are seen as a great state, great education. In 2012, fewer than 600 kids took advanced placement in computer science in Massachusetts. So that's not good. If you're going to work for Google or Facebook, or if you're going to work for National Grid, you need to know that computer science. And
or if you're
we
going to
should
work
be
for
doing
just
that.
really a little precision manufacturing
Yes,
company in
exactly.
Avon or in Easton,
Exactly.
You still need to have those computer skills. Let me go back to something you said earlier. You mentioned equal opportunity for boys and girls. And, there is, first you talked about the income disparity between the haves and the have-nots,
Yep.
which is a growing, crisis in our country. But also, the president has accentuated a little bit of the income disparity between men and women. You would be the first woman to serve as governor of Massachusetts. How important is that?
I like to think, as my dad gave me a plaque when I graduated from law school, he said, sometimes the best man for the job is a woman. So I've carried that to heart, and I've worked hard for what I've done. But I also think, and I got a call a couple of weeks ago from an elected official who said, I want to support you because I have a 13-year-old daughter. And that really touched me, Brian, for someone to say, it is important for all of our children, and particularly our girls now, to see women doctors or women on the bench, women playing sports, women partaking in life, having families, having kids, as we know is important, but making sure that we teach our daughters to lean in and to learn the kinds of skills, job opportunities that will help them get that dollar that every male gets for the hour
So
they
we're
work.
clearly, breaking through barriers in many respects. We have the first African-American Chief Justice comes from here in Milton.
Yes.
We have the first African-American governor
From here in
comes from
Milton.
Milton. We have the first
And that's the first governor ever from Milton, We could check on that.
Okay, so we're on the record. We have $2 on this, all right? So the
Legal gaming.
we had the first woman serve as Senate President, but it is remarkable. In 2014, we've never had a woman serve as governor. So you're also, I assume you're the first woman to serve as Attorney General.
I am. I'm the
All right.
first female Attorney General.
So does that make you have a bit of a, by necessity, I suppose, a tougher exterior? I mean, people, I think, see you as this very smart, very tough, very competent prosecutor, and I see more recently a different side, which I think is welcome among voters, and that there's more to you than just having to be the toughest man or woman in the room in a prosecutorial setting, but also concerned about things beyond justice and law and order. Talk a little bit about some other issues that float your boat or that really interest you or you're passionate about.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, Brian, because that is true in some respects. When you're the district attorney, you're often in a tough press conference, or you've just discovered maybe a child who's been murdered, and
it's hard. I mean, admittedly, it's
hard
to come across as warm and fuzzy when you're dealing with child abuse. I mean,
But by the same token, I've realized that one of the reasons I do what I do is because I do care about those kids and that particular child. And I learned early on that, we do this work in public service, as you do. We pass legislation or, we bring a lawsuit. But it is really, even though we kept 30,000 people in their homes going against Wall Street, I did it as much for people like Kate Reynolds, as a woman who, she and her husband own a house. They're fine until Eddie, who's an arborist, falls out of the tree. He's paralyzed from the waist down. They have medical bills they can't pay, and their house goes underwater. They spent 18 months with one of the big banks trying to get a loan modification. And my heart just goes out to the folks who struggled in that economic crisis with the stress. Now, they were together, and Eddie was alive, but they were worried about losing their home. And the kinds of things that I care about, that I know you care about, have to do with people's ability to be treated fairly. And that is, you do it case by case. That's why we have courts. That's why people have individual cases. And I've learned from those cases that the system should be fair, government should be fair, but we do it for the individuals who really are concerned about being treated fairly and having an opportunity.
So the sense of fair play and justice and essentially equal opportunity if you play by the rules, is that embedded in your DNA from your childhood? Is that part of your upbringing in North Adams?
I really feel that it was. My dad and mom, raised 5 children. They treated us all very fairly, and
Where are you in the birth order?
Well, I'm the middle child, by the way.
I married a middle child.
Well-adjusted.
Everybody should marry a middle child.
And, look, we were all pretty good students, but I have one sister who's a doctor and one sister who went into banking. And, we've talked about my younger brother, Edward, who is very, very smart, but suffered from mental illness and broke all of our hearts. And we wish we could have done better for him, but he wouldn't get treatment. He thought there was a stigma attached to it, and as a result of which, after my parents died and he wouldn't get any help, he had no job, he had no relationships, he committed suicide. And so we lived with that heartbreak and saw a system at that stage that really couldn't do much for him. There was a very difficult problem, and I know families struggle with that now, and my heart goes out to them. And so I have tried, as I talk to people, as I've traveled around the state running for governor in dining rooms and diners, talking to people about what are their concerns, what are their fears. They do worry about their child who needs more help in school. Or, gee, mom and dad are getting older. We don't know if we're going to be able to pay for assisted living for them. Our home has lost its value. How are we going to do this? Or we've lost a child in the war. Or we've, just as I've sat with a family that lost a dad who had lost a leg in the marathon bombings. What's going to happen? And those are the stories that break your heart, but also spur you to do something, to say, we can do better for these folks.
All of us come to public office, I think, really shaped by our own personal experiences, and that's what perhaps makes our democracy great, because everyone's experience is different, and collectively it usually informs our decision-making for the better. But I guess the values instilled in your upbringing in North Adams that shine through today, your experience with your brother's health issues, I think do make you a stronger candidate, and it's part of what's made you a very attractive candidate. For me personally, I've heard you speaking about the mental health crisis, the substance abuse issues that so many families face, and it's incredible to me. I can remember years ago you would think that substance abuse issues may just impact certain families there, but for the grace of God, go any one of our families, any one of our children. Mental health issues, I think, impact 1 in 4 families in Massachusetts. And you talked about it having a certain stigma once upon a time. My now 94-year-old father once told me that when he was young, there was a stigma to talking about cancer, and that people didn't. It was a revelation to me. I'd never heard of it. So we've come a long way, but we certainly have miles and miles to go. That's 4 siblings. That's yourself and 3 siblings. You missed one, I think.
Well, I have 2 older sisters, and one of whom has 3 children, and so we have a lot of grandnieces and nephews. She was also in banking, and was the one really who, after my parents died, bore the brunt of dealing with my brother and working with the rest of us. And so we have been a close family. We're all now in Massachusetts, having been spread out all over the world, but everybody's back. But family is incredibly important. Both good times and bad are what give you your grounding. And as you said, Brian, your sense of values. My dad was very involved in his business. He ran an insurance agency. He was involved in the Chamber of Commerce, in his church. His church was very important. But our family was very close. We always went on vacation together. My folks spent most of their time and energy making sure we were going to have an opportunity to get a good education, to move ahead. And I know my parents were very proud of all of us and what we were able to accomplish.
So you talked about economic development. Other issues I've heard you talk about was education and what your ideas are in that area.
Well, and I am lucky to have a great education, to have that opportunity.
Clearly a bright person. You get into Williams College and on to BU Law School.
Graduating, I was in the first class at Williams to go through all 4 years when they went co-ed. And then went on to law school. That's the Perry Mason piece, of course. When you were reading Nancy Drew, I was reading the Hardy Boys. That's okay. That's okay. I've always loved a good murder mystery. But I have seen, that education is the way that everyone has a chance to learn about themselves, learn about the world, and make their way in the world. And one commitment we should make here in Massachusetts, not every child wants to go into college for 4 years, but all kids have dreams or want to find their dreams, and we should make that commitment in our grammar schools to provide the best possible education and support for our kids to find out who they are and what they do well, and frankly, to get them excited about something in life. And one of the best experiences I've had on the campaign trail, we went to visit Malden High School. Malden's in Middlesex County, very diverse community. I'm in a group of kids many of them were first generation, and their English may have not been their strongest skill. But these kids were learning coding from Paul Marks. He was teaching them computer science. I learned an hour or so. I was able to get the Angry Birds and eating each other, whatever they do. But it was a fascinating window for me because the 2 young boys said to me, "Mr. Marks teaches us how to walk, and we learn how to fly." And these kids were so excited about what they were going to be able to do with what they were learning in school. That's what we want to bring back to our kids, to learn how to learn and to be excited about the future and their own place in it. And to also learn that they're part of a bigger community. They're part of, we've gotten away from teaching kids civics a little bit. You and I understand how important civics are. We know public education comes from making people feel part of something bigger than themselves. But when our kids get skills and they have that sense of community, they're able to give back. That's what makes us strong. And that's where Massachusetts can really be the leader moving forward in a great economy, building regional economies in Merrimack Valley and down in the South Coast, out where I grew up, and getting people engaged in life again. Not just worried about this job and making money on Wall Street, but what are the things that matter? Your family, your relationships, giving back to the community. We just went through an incredible couple of weeks with our preparations for the marathon. Look what that has done to the city to say, we care about each other, we are strong and we are tough. That's what's so great about this state.
So part of the theme that I see is kind of an intergenerational responsibility to each other. And one of my favorite quotes I borrowed from my late father-in-law was G.K. Chesterton's, "Education is simply the soul of society as we pass from one generation to another." And it is important as we want to take care of mom and dad and provide adequate health care and housing, and whether it's assisted or otherwise, we also want to provide to subsequent generations the same opportunities that we had. And so I appreciate you touching upon that. And then the third thing you talked a little bit about was health care, and you might want to expand a little bit on some of your ideas there.
So we have very good health care here in some respects, and it is expensive, and we've done our work in the Attorney General's office to try and bring those costs down, looking at a market and having some legislation that will allow us to cut the cost curve at least, and certainly the mental health and behavioral health care piece is important. But we have that great resource here in Massachusetts to be able to provide not just good health care for some, but to provide access and cost-effective health care, including moving to more prevention, identifying earlier some of our biggest cost drivers like diabetes and asthma. If we could get a handle on some of those problems, we've had better outcomes for those kids as we look at how it's related to their ability to do well in school. You can't bring a kid into a doctor, get an inhaler, and then send them back to a musty apartment that has moldy rugs.
You know, it's funny. Someone once gave a great analogy. He said it's as if we're, you know, people are falling off a cliff, and we're making sure there's adequate ambulances at the bottom to pick them up and repair them, rather than maybe figure out why they're going off the cliff, whether it's better nutrition,
right.
you know, better exercise, diet, and the
And
like.
we know a lot, of that, actually.
Yeah, we do.
know that we should do better along those areas.
We do. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about politics. So you have a Democratic primary, and if you're the nominee, and you know, my suspicion is you will be, I hope you are, if you are the nominee, you have a tough election in the fall, and probably against a candidate that has run, you know, unscathed, and has not had to go to the hard right to kind of please the Republican primary voters. But you are challenged now. Does that make it more difficult for you, or does it make you better and stronger?
I think this Democratic primary has been very helpful, actually, to everybody in it. I think we've had 5 good candidates who have good ideas. We've challenged each other. I've learned from everybody in this race about what's important to voters and their ideas about what they'd like to see moving forward. I think everybody in the race would agree. We've had a very helpful primary. We've looked at environmental issues, we've looked at education issues, and I think we've all become stronger as a result of that. I feel that I am running a race before the convention, before the primary, that will be the same I run before November's election, which is, this is about our future in Massachusetts and what we're going to be able to do. And I really feel, as to what I've seen and what I've been able to do, when you bring good people into your cabinet, when you work with the legislature around getting things that need to be changed, need to be done, we increase our business activity here, we keep businesses here, we provide workforce, we're going to be able to do all those things in Massachusetts, not overnight, but I think I see an opportunity to build that strong foundation, a good, strong economy, not something like we saw with the Wall Street bubble, where it crashed and we're still digging out from it. And I think that as we, for instance, talking about our kids, not just education, but a better planet. We've invested in Massachusetts in clean energy. Not only are we more thoughtful now about what it means to be healthy for us and the ground we live in, the ground we live on, but it's an economic driver. We've got businesses across the state that are investing in and showing us how we can have clean, sustainable energy that create jobs and also help us lead the way for other states. So I'm excited about that. And our strength is our kids, right? They are our future. They're going to be able to show us what we need to learn in the next 10, 15 years.
Okay, here's the key question to the entire interview. Who's the best state senator that you've had the pleasure of working with?
It has to be Brian Joyce.
All right,
There's no
so
question.
she wins. Okay, so let me just give a couple of shout-outs to the Attorney General on a couple of issues. One that I've spoken about on this television program before is protecting, you know, one of my dad's favorite quotes was from Hubert Humphrey, who he suggested that the moral test of government is how that government treats those that are in the dawn of life,
Yep.
the children, those that are in the twilight of life, the seniors, and those that are in the shadows of life, the poor, the sick, and the disabled. And I've been on a mission for a dozen years or more to protect those disabled children at the Judge Rotenberg Center in Canton. The Attorney General has stepped up and prosecuted the former head of that school and helped protect innocent children, for which I'm very grateful. This governor, Deval Patrick, is the first to set forth regulations that, again, protect innocent children, for which I'm very grateful. And I've also had the pleasure of joining the Attorney General in Randolph and elsewhere, where I've seen her interact with families that were devastated by the mortgage and foreclosure crisis, have helped victims of violence and abuse and their families who will stand up and champion her candidacy. And I've also witnessed firsthand the response that you get from those who are concerned about mental health and substance abuse issues. So I look forward to spending a lot more time with you in the weeks and months ahead, and am cautiously optimistic that you will be our next governor. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today, and let me just give my sincere thanks to Martha Coakley for taking time out of her busy campaign schedule and duties as the Attorney General to join us here today and talk about these issues facing the Commonwealth, as well as to talk about her candidacy. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, I can be reached at brian.a.joyce@masenate.gov or at 617-722-1643. And you can also find me at Facebook and follow me on Twitter at Brian A. Joyce. I got to tell you, a local reporter for the Patriot Ledger just did a thing on politicians and their Twitter accounts and their Facebook accounts. And Jack Cardinal in my office gave me up and said, if you ever get a response, it's coming from him. Jack, I'm going to get you for that. Thanks very much.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you
Thanks.
for having me as your guest.